Good morning. We are going to be starting lesson 5, and I'm going to tell you that this is going to be a 2-day lesson. This is day 1 of a 2-day lesson. We will be doing the paperwork on this lesson tomorrow, but I wanted you to see that we are going to be doing lesson 5. We will take care of the paperwork tomorrow because there's a couple of fun things I want you to do today. I'm going to invite you at home to watch that Eureka video. The teacher asks you to make a 3-dimensional cube using marshmallows and toothpicks. If you would like to do that, that is just fine. We will not be doing that here at school, however. Instead, here at school, and I'm sorry that you don't have a copy of this, but you can find one online, we are going to put together a 3-dimensional cube. When I talk about something being 3-dimensional or 3D, I'm talking about something that takes up space. Up to this point, we have been looking at plane figures. Plane figures are flat and do not take up space. 3-dimensional or 3D figures take up space. The 3-dimensional figure that we're going to be studying today is a cube. And by the time this lesson is complete, you will need to be able to count the faces, count the edges, and count the vertices, or the vertex. Vertex is singular, vertices is plural. So since there's going to be more than one vertex, we are going to be counting the vertices. There will be several vertices. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. You will need to have a copy of a net. This pattern is called a net. A net is a pattern for a 3-dimensional figure. The 3-dimensional figure that we will be creating from this net is called a cube. There are lots and lots of things in your world that are in the shape of a cube. And when we get, well, a good example of a 3-dimensional cube would be a pair of dice. A dice would be 2 cubes. A Kleenex box sometimes is in the shape of a cube, although I don't have one with me right now. But I'm certain if you looked around your house, you could find things that would be in the shape of a cube. And by the time the lesson is over, I'm hoping that you have done that. So when we are making a 3-dimensional figure, we need to have some kind of a net. Those of you who are at home may have to go online and find yourself a net that you can use for this assignment, or if you want, you can make the 3-dimensional figure that they make on the video with marshmallows and toothpicks. And I realize that that's some materials you're going to need to gather, but of course you are going to need to gather those. You will also need for this assignment a straight edge again. I'm going to be using a yellow highlighter, and I am also going to be using a red colored pencil. So these are the tools that you will need for completing this assignment. And hopefully you can take the time to go and get those materials, because you will need this 3-dimensional cube for today's assignment. You will also need it for tomorrow's assignment. So let's go ahead and get ourselves started. I'm going to start with pointing out this little section right here. Each of these little parts of the net are in the shape of a, I'm hoping you're saying, well, Miss Star, that's easy. That is in the shape of a square. Now these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts of this particular net are called a face. And I would very much like it if you would write the word face on your net. All right, so I'm going to write F-A-C-E. There's one face. This is also a face. Any place you have a square, a 2-dimensional square, you have a face of this 3-dimensional cube. So here is my face, and as I counted before, there are going to be, let's count those again so I can start filling out my little paper here. I want to know how many faces are there on this net. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to write 6 faces on my practice paper here. So then we want to take a look at the edges. So the edges are where, well, this is a little bit harder to explain until we have this put together, but I'm going to tell you that we will be outlining those edges, which is what I'm going to have you do right now. I'm going to take my straight edge and I am going to be outlining not all of the bold lines, but some of the bold lines. And I'm going to hold my ruler off just a little bit because I want that edge to really show up when I get this put together. So I'm going across that edge. I'm going to turn my paper upside down so I can get a good close view of what I'm doing. I'm going to highlight this edge. And I'm using my yellow highlighter, but you can use a colored pencil if you would like. I just find that it's faster to do it with my highlighter. I'm going to highlight this edge. Uh-oh. Oh, for a minute there I thought my marker had stopped working. Now on this one I have to make sure that I highlight both sides of that edge. So I've got an edge on this square and I have an edge on this square. So I'm being careful to make sure that I'm highlighting the edge on both sides so that I can count those edges once I have my three-dimensional cube put together. So I'm making sure that that edge is highlighted on both sides, especially on these center squares. And that black line is pretty thick and hard to see over the top of. Let's see, oops, I got to get this edge up here. I have to make sure I get all of my edges. And you're going to be cutting this out, so if you get some marker on the outside, that would be fine. There's an edge there. A little harder to count the edges when you're looking at the net, but it's very easy to count the edges once you have this put together. So let's see, I've got to make sure I get all of my edges. And if you decide to make the one that they show on the videotape, I don't know, I think it looks a little flimsy, but you can try it. You can count the toothpicks because they will be counting as edges. I personally like to have something that I can hold in my hand and not have it fall apart on me, which is why I'm opting to do it with the net rather than with toothpicks and marshmallows. Okay, so now I have outlined all of my edges. A little bit harder to count those edges, but we will count those and find out what the edges are after we put our three-dimensional figure together. Now, the next thing that we're going to be counting is the vertex. Vertex is singular. A vertex, as they pointed out in the video, is where you have a corner. My definition is where you have at least three lines, or three edges coming together that make a point. That is called a vertex. So I am going to highlight now my vertices. That's plural. Every place I have two or more lines coming together, and I want to make that circle pretty good size so that I can see it when I put this together. I'm going to go around and highlight all of those. Oh my gosh, I don't know why that pencil is not showing up quite as good as I'd like it to. Is it because my ink is still dry? I'm not really sure why. Okay, here we go. Here's my next vertices, my next vertex. Here's one here. Well, I'm going to try and see if this would maybe do better. I'm switching over to a crayon here. See if that, oh, that's much better. I'm switching over to a crayon. I didn't want to use a crayon on my edges, but I think I'm going to use a crayon on my vertices. It's just showing up better. So I got to be able to see where those sides or those edges come together, and every place that they come together, making sure that I get all of them. I think this would not be, there we go, there's another one there, and there's one there, and one right there. Any place where I have two or more edges coming together, I need to highlight for my vertex. A vertex is the mathematical way to say a corner, and we were looking at vertexes on our plane figures last week, and I can't remember if I used that word or not. Probably, I hope I did. All right, so when you get finished with this part, you have everything now ready to go. Your edges, I'm going to make this one a little bit darker. Your edges are going to be yellow. Your vertices are going to be red or orange, and your faces are going to remain white. So right now it was pretty easy to count those faces. We'll count the edges and the vertex in a few minutes. Now, oops, I forgot to point out, you're going to need to have some kind of glue or tape to be able to tape this net together. So I'm going to now get my pair of scissors, and when I cut out this net, I want to make sure that I follow the outside edge of this net or pattern. So you're going to be cutting out the outside edge, and I know this seems silly, but you'd be surprised how many kids cut off the tabs. You don't want to cut off the little tabs, and you need to carefully cut so that you have your net then cut out from the rest of the paper. You know, sometimes I have to stop myself, and today is the day that I'm going to stop myself. I'm glad I didn't get cutting too far, because there's one more thing that I need you to do with this net that will make it much easier to be able to fold. I am going to take a regular pencil and my straight edge, and I'm going to go over that edge with a regular pencil 2 or 3 times, not for it to show, but rather to make it a little bit easier to crease. And I wish that I would have remembered that before I had you start cutting. I hope that you stopped that cutting. I am so sorry. Yeah, and I had to kind of modify this lesson just a little bit to make it work a little bit better, not only for you at home, but for our friends here at school. So I'm going to go over all of those edges, especially the edges that I'm going to need to be folding. So that's basically all of those edges. I'm going to go over them with a pencil, because they really will fold much easier if I do that. Make sure, especially on these little tabs, that you don't want to cut those tabs off, but you are going to have to fold those tabs. Let's see, did I do that one? I can't remember. I probably better do it again, even if I didn't. So I'm going over those black edges with a regular pencil just to be certain that I can fold this a little more easily. After having made lots of these over my course of teaching, which has been 30 years, I should have remembered that I needed to do that, but I'm really not used to doing things. Well, this year's, I guess, a bit of an exception. This year I've had to do a lot of online teaching. This little tab, I'm just going to write tab on there. These little tabs, don't cut those off. I should have said that in the beginning. Don't cut off the tab. You will need that when you're folding your net. Sure glad I remembered. The little tab. Don't have time to go back and re-videotape this one. So I have to take it the best I can for right now. Okay, I think I got all those tabs. Don't cut those tabs off, and hopefully you went over all of those edges with a pencil, just because it will make it a lot easier to cut it out. Now I'm back to cutting. And I have to cut this very, very carefully, because if I'm going to have a good example of my 3-dimensional cube, I need to have it cut as precisely as possible. So I'm being very careful to stay on those black lines, going right into those corners, which is a little harder. Oops, sorry. A little bit harder to get those corners. Not cutting off the tabs. Making sure that my vertices are still visible by the time I get done, which is why I always have you make them pretty good size. And cutting all the way around. And this will make it a lot easier to count the edges and the vertices once we have our 3-dimensional cube put together. Okay, a little close on that side, but we can get that. Okay, hopefully you were able to find a net online and you were able to print it out. If you didn't, I have lots of copies of them here at school and would be more than happy to give you one, but that would mean you'd have to come over and pick it up. And I apologize for that, but I have not been through these lessons before, and sometimes they catch me a little bit by surprise. Now, I don't want to throw this piece away. And I don't really want to throw this piece away because that's going to remind me of what we're doing. But I am going to throw these other little small pieces into the garbage so they're not in my way. I made an interesting little triangle there. Okay, so I'm going to keep the fact that my net now has been cut out, and I still want to find out how many edges and how many vertices. All right, so here we go. There's our net, all nice and cut out. Now your next job is going to be to fold, which is why I had you do those pencil marks. It'll make the folding a little bit easier. You're going to fold along those edges. Folding along, make a good tight crease on each of those edges that are apart. Oops, that one's not very straight, mister, because I want my cube to turn out. I also have to fold the tabs. And if you went over them with a pencil, it really will make things much, much easier. Folding over that tab, right on that black line. And if you use the pencil like I told you to, folding those tabs especially will be so much easier. If you didn't, you might struggle to do the folding. Okay, and I realize that this may take a little bit of practice for you to be able to successfully use this net and fold it into a cube. So now I'm looking at this. I'm going to move this over because I don't need it anymore. Whoop, there went my ruler. So now that I have folded, oops, I didn't fold this edge. Gotta fold all those edges. Did I fold everything? I think I did. So I think you can you get the idea of how this will be able to go together to create a cube. So when whoops, I'm gonna get that piece of paper back, change my mind, because I'm gonna now have to put glue on all of my tabs. I have done this with Scotch tape before. That can work as well. If you do glue like I'm about to do, you'll have to work kind of fast so that you can get all of those tabs where they need to be to create your three-dimensional cube. And it takes a little bit of trickiness, and it might take a little bit of practice for you to get that. And now let's wish me luck as I try to put my three-dimensional cube together. So I'm going to put this one right here, press that down, press. I'm going to bring this one. This one is coming right. Whoops, let's see here. I'm going to put, yeah, a little on the tricky side. Put that one right there. It's starting to come together. What do you know? This one needs to come up here so I can put that together. Okay, so it is a little tricky. And you might have to have some help from an adult, and that's fine. We're just figuring out how to put this little cube together. Put that right. This is always a challenge, but we can do it. And if it's not absolutely perfect, don't beat yourself up, because I think mine's going to be off just the tiniest little bit. Oh dear, my glue is drying out fast. Here we go. Sometimes I break down, and I do use Scotch tape just to get me where whoop, that tab needs to go in there. Trying to keep, oh, hey, Miss Star, not too bad. There we go. Now, I went from a net to now a three-dimensional cube. Very well done, Miss Star. Very well done. Okay, there you go. That's where you're heading. So now you have a 3D or a three-dimensional cube. And if everything doesn't line up exactly perfect, it's okay, because I've got one vertices there that's kind of poking out weird, but I still can get the general idea of what I need to do. Hey, that was kind of fun. It's like a big dice or a big cube. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what it is. All right, so now when you get that completed, and I went from the net, which was the pattern, to now a three-dimensional shape, I do want to try and use my three-dimensional shape to help me now count how many vertices I have and how many edges I have. So I'm just taking this little piece of paper that came off of my net so that I can use it to complete this assignment. Because the exit ticket that you're going to be doing today, you have to be able to count faces, edges, and vertices using your three-dimensional cube. All right, now just for giggles, I am going to count my faces. Now, when you count on a three-dimensional figure, if you don't keep track of your counting, you will get lost. So I am going to demonstrate how you can do that counting so we can assure ourselves that this three-dimensional cube does indeed have 6 faces. Well, we saw that clearly from the net, but now let's pretend we didn't have the net. I'm going to think about the top and the bottom. Okay, the top of my cube is 1. The bottom of my cube, which I'm not going to flip it over, is 2. So top is 1, bottom is 2. Then I have sides that I need to count, and I need to keep track of where I started. Top and bottom, and now I have to count around the sides. So 1, 2, and I'm going to start on this side. 3, that's that side. 4, 5, and 6. And I started here. So when I counted those faces, I had 6 faces. Top is 1, bottom is 2, coming back, side 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it is confirmed, yes indeed, that I have 6 faces. Now, counting edges is a little more tricky, but I want you to think of the top, I want you to think of the bottom, and I want you to think of the sides. So let's start by counting those edges, and remember those edges are going to be your yellow highlighted line. So let's start here. You have to keep track. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I have to turn it over and do the bottom. 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've done top and bottom. Now I have to go around the edges. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Uh-oh, wait a minute. Whoa. I got to back that up because I totally messed that up. Erase, 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 erase. You got to erase because I counted some of them twice. My gosh, that is a big mistake that kids make. Actually, I made that mistake on purpose because I need you to see why it's important that you keep track of what you've already counted. So shall we try that again? Here we go. Okay, so here we go. I got to make sure that I don't double count those edges because it's very easy to do. 1, 2, 3, 4. That covers the top. Now I'm coming down to do the bottom. 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to go back to the top. And now I don't want to double count those edges because I've already counted those. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, if I did it the way I just did a minute ago, you can see that I was counting some of those edges twice. That is a very common mistake, and I wanted you to see how common and easy it is to make that boo-boo. So let's count those edges again. 1, 2, 3, 4. I love to draw my finger along them so I know that I've already touched that edge. That was the top. Now I'm going to do the bottom. 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm going to go back to the top, and I've got to get the ones that are on the sides. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So 12 edges. Wherever I have 2 faces coming together, they form an edge. So 2 faces coming together to form an edge, 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 and the same thing is true on the bottom. Where I have 2 faces coming together, I form an edge, 2 faces coming together to form an edge, 2 faces coming together to form another edge, and 2 faces coming together to form another edge. Usually when I count edges, I like to hold that cube up off the table and counting. On the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, then I count the bottom. 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I want to count the edges around the sides. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So 12 edges. If you get more than 12, you have double counted your edges. As I showed you at the beginning, it's very easy to make that boo-boo. Now let's count the vertex. The vertex is where you have 1, 2, 3 faces coming together that form a corner or a point. So let's count those vertices. We've got 1, that's my red dot, 2, 3, and 4. Then I'm going to come down to the bottom, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Wherever I have 3 faces coming together to form a corner. So there's corner 1, corner 2, corner 3, corner 4 vertices, and I'm going to now do the bottom, corner 5, corner 6, corner 7, and corner 8. That's why I had you highlight those in red so they would be easy for you to count. So a cube has 6 faces, 12 edges, and 8 vertices, or vertex. Vertex is singular, vertices is more than one. And since we have 8, we need to use vertices. If I was going to only consider this singular one, I would say vertex. If I'm talking about more than one, I'm going to say vertices. Now, my dear friends, hopefully you had a lot of fun doing that. And you're going to think, well, Miss Starr, that exit ticket is not going to be too tough. Well, you're right, it's not going to be too tough, but this is what your exit ticket looks like. And of course, you do not have a copy of this because I had to make one. Your job, and this is what you'll need to do to send to your teacher, she is going to be interested in this part right here. So make sure that you have your name on it and today's date, which is the 5th month, the 10th day in the year 2021, sending this to your teacher, and you're going to tell her how many faces does this 3-dimensional cube have. Well, of course, this one is a 2D one that's made to look 3-dimensional, which we'll be doing that tomorrow. We'll be drawing some 3-dimensional cubes, and don't freak out because it's not as hard as it looks. So how many faces, how many edges, and how many vertices? And you can use your cube to help you be able to count edges and faces and vertices. And with that, my friends, I'm going to tell you to have a great day of learning.